Okay, I'm going to get into the headline on the screen here that just happened March 25th, 2024. Trump bond cut by 68% to 175 million as he appeals New York fine. Before getting into what is encoded into this headline, though, I want to read a comment that I left on the last video to set it up so you'll fully understand what I mean, just in case you have not seen this comment yet. Michael Douglas played the main character in Falling Down, which was released 2/26/93, the same day as the first World Trade Center bombing, obviously implying that the towers would eventually fall down, quote unquote, on 9/11/2001. You have this amazing coincidence that this movie called Falling Down is released on the very day that the World Trade Center Twin Towers are bombed in 1993. The subconscious implication being that you're unaware of at the time, hey, these towers that are all over the news are going to fall down in a few years. Nobody has any idea that that is what is taking place at the time. However, subconsciously, it is infusing your stream of consciousness with that idea so that you tacitly accept it when it eventually transpires. Remembering also that not only did they release Falling Down on 2/26/93, but they also put the 2/26/93 into the phone number of the Millennium Monolith Hilton that would be overlooking Ground Zero when those towers fell down on September 11, 2001. So now, fast forward to 2024, and Michael Douglas is going to play Ben Franklin in the Franklin miniseries that's being released on Apple TV, I believe, on April 12th, 2024, 4 days after the April 8th portion of the Great American Eclipse. According to history books, Franklin was instrumental in helping the colonies gain independence from Britain, to the extreme where they refer to his time in France as one of the greatest diplomatic achievements of all time. In other words, as they tell the story via their history books, there would have been no USA without Ben Franklin. Michael Douglas then is playing Franklin to evoke the idea that the USA Ben Franklin helped create in 1776 is now falling down in the context of the Great American Eclipse. Franklin is being released the same day as Civil War, both of which are being released one day after Fallout. Franklin and Civil War are being released April 12th, 2024, and then one day earlier on April 11th, 2024, Fallout is being released. And remember that Fallout is being directed by Christopher Nolan's brother, Jonathan. Granted, this is my own speculation here, but symbolically, this is to say that as a part of the Great American Eclipse ritual destruction of America, the USA will, quote-unquote, fall down as a result of the, quote-unquote, fallout from the Civil War. And I don't even mean that in terms of an actual shooting war like they will depict in the Civil War film in some capacity. This could mean any variation of that. It could simply be referring to the seemingly unresolvable division that exists in the United States of America in an artificial way as it has been programmed into everyone's minds. That division could be viewed in some kind of irreconcilable way where it has the effects of a civil war, destabilizing the country, delegitimizing the government and all of the institutions. The fallout from that division leads to the empire falling down. This twin 9/11 Great American Eclipse ritual was foreshadowed via the mini 9/11 ritual in 1968, where Flight 1611 crashed in France on 9/11/68, 11 days before a total solar eclipse on 9/22/68. Interesting that this was a Air France flight in the context of Franklin now in the role that that is playing relating to Civil War and fallout and the destruction of the United States of America. In the context of this mini ritual, there's this flight in France on 9/11/1968 that many of the survivor families believe was shot down by a missile, or in some other way was taken down, whether it was intentional or by an accident from some kind of training exercise. Of course, in the context of all this, there's no way it would be an accident, but I'm just telling you what they say in the news, right? Either way, there is a lot of smoke around the idea that this was not an accidental plane crash that just happened out of the blue, meaning this plane crash is most likely an intentional fractal of the 9/11/2001 ritual sacrifice, which is then followed closely by the 1968 total solar eclipse. Meaning you have this 9/11 plane crash in 1968 that could be viewed as a ritual sacrifice aimed at success for the larger ritual that they knew in 1968 was going to take place in 2001. And my intuition would be most likely they chose 1968 because that total solar eclipse in 1968 would take place 11 days after September 11th of that year. And that's the year that they decided to begin constructing the North Tower. In that way, it was a mini ritual sacrifice in the way that they used to in the past sacrifice living beings on the cornerstone of these buildings they would build to somehow protect it in some way or give it some kind of energy. I mean, these people are sick. I'm not defending them in any way, shape, or form. I'm just telling you what is reported about it. But that mini ritual in the context of those kind of cornerstone rituals might make a little bit of sense because that's the year they started building the tower, and this mini ritual, crashing that plane and killing those people, was some kind of offering for the larger ritual in 2001. And then symbolically, it's followed 11 days later by a total solar eclipse. And in terms of the larger 9/11/2001 ritual that would eventually turn into the Great American Eclipse ritual in 2017 and 2024, with those two total solar eclipses, you foreshadow that second leg of the ritual as well, the continuation of it. Ritually sacrifice a plane on 9/11/1968, the same year that you start building the towers, 11 days before a total solar eclipse, and you have encapsulated the whole larger ritual that is designed to destroy the United States of America. Which is, of course, being spearheaded by the 9/11 twin and eclipse moonchild Donald Trump, who was born during a lunar eclipse blood moon. So he was the president they chose way back then to be elected on 11/9/16 and then play out this conspiracy theorist, domestic terrorist narrative as it relates to the ritual destruction of America and everything they are now doing to and through Trump along those lines. No accident or coincidence then that 2001: A Space Odyssey was released nationwide on April 6, 1968, but the first premiere of 2001: A Space Odyssey was on April 2nd in Washington, D.C. Very appropriate considering the ritual that was going on here relating to America and the role that 1968 played in that ritual. And this could just be a coincidence. It would depend on whether or not Timothy McVeigh was kind of like Donald Trump and he was induced to be born on a specific day as a part of this ritual to be included in it later on. Or maybe they identified him at some point in the same way that people get identified online in forums now or wherever they're talking about this kind of stuff, and then they are groomed by federal agents to commit some kind of act. Maybe they identify this guy with this birthday in that context, and then eventually they make him the patsy of the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. Or he was just like Donald Trump, related to the bloodline in some way, shape, or form, and they used him as a part of this ritual for this reason. But because he had a copy of the Turner Diaries in the car they attributed to being his, he was viewed as the start of this domestic terrorist white nationalist narrative, or at least the mainstreaming of it. And he just so happened to be born on April 23rd, 1968, 17 days after the theatrical release of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that should take on a little extra weight for you, knowing the importance of 17 to Donald Trump, because Q is the 17th letter of the alphabet. And then his first presidency was in 2017 during the first leg of the Great American Eclipse. And then the first QAnon post was in 2017, October 28th, the same day that Matthew Perry died. 6 years later, on October 28th, 2023, during a lunar eclipse, who made a film 17 again and has all of this water associated with him. Well, it just so happens that Timothy McVeigh was born 17 days after 2001: A Space Odyssey. But that one is a little bit of a stretch because you could pick any day in terms of the releases. If you choose the nationwide release, it's 17 days. But if you choose that original April 2nd limited release in Washington, D.C., well, now it's not 17 days anymore. But it felt significant enough to at least talk about it, bring it up. Having gone into all of that, let's get to this headline about Donald Trump and the bond in the New York civil case that was due on March 25th, 2024. Again, remembering that he is the moon child, and the gravitational pull as the moon child that he has on our collective stream of consciousness and the water in our bodies amplifies things that take place during those windows where there's an eclipse going on. Which again is why he was chosen to amplify all of this stuff during these two total solar eclipses that form this X over the United States of America, which symbolically represents the ritual destruction of the United States of America. This mini ritual regarding this lunar eclipse 2 weeks before the April 8th eclipse is similarly charged. It's similarly amplifying these things, potentially referring to some type of resurrection ritual, as I got into in the last video, noting that this is taking place about a week before Easter this year. And before this took place, it really looked like Donald Trump was not going to survive. And speaking of the eclipses, remember that there's another one, October 2nd, 2024, right before the USA election, a solar eclipse that goes over Easter Island. So you're infusing all of this eclipse energy as it relates to resurrection and Easter and Donald Trump in this window in time leading up to the April 8th eclipse. And then when October rolls around, you have this other eclipse that will go through Easter Island, and you have symbolically created this resurrection theme via Donald Trump and everything you've associated with him via the scripting in the news. So all of that said, look at this headline. Trump bond cut by 68% to $175 million as he appeals New York fine. What are the odds that the amount would get cut at exactly 68%, given what I went into here about the importance of 1968 as it relates to this 9/11 ritual that Donald Trump is a part of as the twin of 9/11, and then the second plane that hit the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. on September 11th, 2001 was Flight 175. And Donald Trump is the symbolic second tower. Donald Trump is the South Tower in comparison to the North Tower, which is the original 9/11 event. When you're viewing it symbolically like this, in terms of twins, Donald Trump is the twin of 9/11. The event itself was the planes crashing into the Twin Towers. That is symbolically the first tower being struck. And then symbolically the second tower being struck as it relates to the ritual destruction of America is the election of Donald Trump on 11/9/16 and what he has done to help destroy the United States of America. In other words, he is Flight 175. And they show that to you during a lunar eclipse by cutting his bond payment 68% to $175 million in a New York civil fraud case. Remember, there were 17 minutes between those two towers being hit. Q is the 17th letter of the alphabet, all the 17 surrounding Donald Trump. He's the South Tower. He has all of that energy resonating around him. So it is not an accident that they chose this number because they could write this headline. 175 million or 68% of what he previously owed. He is the twin of 9/11, which is why he has his own monolith in the United Nations Plaza that is almost identical to the monolith at Ground Zero. Metaphorically, he is Flight 175. In the mini 1968 ritual context, where the 9/11 68 plane crash was followed 11 days later by the September 22nd total solar eclipse. Donald Trump is that Flight 175 crashing into the United States of America. He is the South Tower. The second leg of the ritual, or the second tower destroyed in the ritual. Which, of course, is why they released the Dark Tower film 17 days before August 21st, 2017, on the same day that they released the Dark Matter album, because that's what Donald Trump is. He's the Dark Tower holding the gate or the portal to the quantum leap into what these rituals will produce in the stream of consciousness.